So, very warm welcome to everyone who is here on the Zoom this morning, my morning, and your different times of the day, and a very warm welcome to everyone joining us on YouTube or wherever it is, whatever medium later on. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is the 8th teaching in our series on the Mahayana Uttara Tantra Shastra, Asanga's wonderful work on the ultimate truth and Buddha nature, also known as the Ratna Gotra Vibhanga, which means the treasury of the most precious essence. It's a very, very good title. Lots of translators these days and commentators kind of prefer that title. It's closer to what the whole text is about. So anyway, before we start, as always, we take this very, very special, very precious moment to remind ourselves how wonderful. We're still alive. We're still here. We've still got our wits about us. We've still got Dharma. That's enough for a kind of a whoopee moment of happiness. It really is. It really is. It's so rare, so very, very precious, even though it seems so normal. That's the problem with wonderful things. They seem normal till they stop. And then you realize that they're quite rare and precious and how fortunate it all was. So anyway, in a very kind of positive frame of mind, we tried to raise as much love and kindness and compassion and care for our fellow beings as we can, as much devotion and respect for the three refuges that we've been learning about so far in this text. And we do our beginning motivation session through prayer. We take refuge in the Buddha, in the Dharma, and in the community of most noble minds. From this moment on until we reach the very heart of enlightenment. Through our practice of generosity and all 6 transcendent virtues, may we reach total awakening and every enlightened quality, to be able to truly help sentient beings so lost in samsara. May each and every being be well, live long, be healthy, be well provided for. May they have good friends and find respect. May they live in places of peace and plenty, and most of all, may they practice Dharma. May they each create the causes for those good circumstances to be their wealth in future lives. May they be free from suffering and from creating causes of future suffering. May they discover the natural, sacred well-being that's totally beyond suffering and attain great equanimity, free of closeness or distance from anyone. Deyata shame shamawati shameta shadro amkure marajite karota keori tejowati oloyani beshula nemale malapan ye kukure kaka grase grasana omuki paramuki amuki shame dawane sawagraha bandanane Nikritva sawa bhava pravadina vimukta mara pasha savitva buddha mudra annudgatita sava mare butsarita parishuddhe Bigashantu Savamarakama. Glorious Guru, source of all blessing, ever present above our head on lotus and moon seat, through your immense kindness ever sustain us, that the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind flow from you, and we are one. So we are picking up from 2 weeks ago, and there we finished a major section of the text. So let's zoom in like we do, just in terms of the structure of the text. So of all the Buddha's teachings, there is a sutra and tantra, and then from those teachings, especially the sutra, we look at them in terms of the 3 phases of Buddha's teaching, 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. And from about 15 or so sutras given by the Buddha in that 3rd turning of the wheel of Dharma, then emerges the teachings on this ultimate nature, this quintessential nature, that, for want of a better word, we call it, or that. Or, as we find today, we call it suchness. These teachings were put together very clearly and explained very clearly by a Sangha. So we're studying a Sangha's text. And we saw that this text is in 3 main parts, technically, which is the good beginning, the title and the homage, and the good end, which is the dedication, and in between, the main body of the text. That main body of the text is in 2 main sections. The first section has 3 chapters, the second section has 4 chapters, and so we get the 7 Vajra abodes, or the 7 Vajra chapters. The first 3, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, went together. They went together as the first part of this text under the title of the goal to be achieved. So we're looking at Buddha, Dharma, Sangha as an achievement. So now we've gone through those 3 chapters, plus the little section summing up at the end, the refuges. We can look back and we can see that this text is about ultimate reality and about this, well, there, of course, we run out of words. We know we're talking about something beyond concept, beyond words, but nevertheless, we're doing our best with terminology, with our thinking processes to try to get some idea. So the language can never be accurate enough because we're talking about something beyond the scope of language for many reasons. But nevertheless, we are talking about this state, about what we call it or that. And we're seeing that when we become that, 100%, we are what's called Buddha. That or it is the ultimate nature of everything, whatever you call it, everyone, everything, the universe, reality. It is the changeless nature of everything, the changeless truth of everything. So when we become that, then we are Buddha. And we understood Buddha through 2 main areas. Ultimate benefit for ourselves is the very, very best thing anyone can ever do for themselves is become Buddha. We explored that. It's also the very best thing for everybody else, ultimate benefit through its wisdom, loving compassion, and its power to help. So when we become that, we are Buddha. And that is the source of all the Dharma. So Buddhas teach Dharma, or the way they teach, what they teach, everything comes from that. That is what Buddha, that's what we become Buddha, and from that come all the Dharma teachings. And when that is continuously present, before we're 100% become that, become that is the word Tathagata. Tata is that, gata means became. Tathagata became that. So before we're 100% Buddha, when we're in the 10 bodhisattva levels, there is the presence of that alongside what we still have left to purify. So someone who has that constantly present as their main being, their default nature, we call a great bodhisattva. And they are for us the noble Sangha, the real Sangha refuge, because they are plugged in to what we've already seen is where all the Dharma comes from. The Dharma, the teachings of universal truth, which flow naturally from this universal nature. So this kind of core it, that we need to get our head around, as opposed to Buddha's one thing, Dharma's another thing, Sangha's another thing. There is a nature, a reality, a something to be achieved. That's what this first section about. That's what's got to be achieved. The next section, the last 4 Vajra abodes or Vajra chapters, are about how one does become that, the causes for that result. Causes for that result. So that's the last section of the text, and that's what we're going into now. The way we go into it is with a brief introduction, but a very important introduction. And then after that, we'll go into the details of the last 4. So they are Buddha nature. We call it Buddha nature. That's not really a direct translation of the term. It's what everyone uses these days. It works quite well in language, but it is called well, we'll look at that later, but it's the potential, let's say. It's very hard to find one word, and part of it, when we get to it, explains how it embodies several notions. So we call it Buddha nature. In one way, we're talking about the potential in all of us. So in that sense, it's a potential. In another way, we're looking at an ancient heritage or a birthright. It's called clan. In Scotland, they have clans. It's kind of the family you're born into. And then in all sorts of stories, literature, fairy tales, you get the person who's, whatever it is, a prince, but they don't know it. So we have this kind of, we're frogs that haven't been kissed yet. And we've got this inheritance that's to be awakened. So it's very much like a clan, a royal blood, a bloodline. It's like the DNA is in you already to manifest. So there's that sense. It's also referred to as a seed, with the idea that a seed contains all the programming for the eventual fruit, fruition, harvest. So there are many terms like this. There are a few which give us the feeling of what in Sanskrit is this gotra. It's called gotra, Gotra. And it resonates. If you were a Sanskrit speaker and listening to this word, it would resonate. Potential, seed, bloodline, inheritance. You'd have all those meanings resonating in you when you hear the word gotra. And in Tibetan, it's rik, not rikpa that you find used many times these days, meaning primordial intelligence. Is a different spelling of rik. So, the last 4 chapters, gotra, or Buddha nature we call it, and then enlightenment, and then the qualities of enlightenment, and then the activity of enlightenment. So those 4, Buddha nature, enlightenment, qualities of enlightenment, and enlightened activity are here shown, now get your head around this, as the cause for Buddha Dhamma Sangha. Now this is not obvious because they might sound like the result, wouldn't they? Enlightenment, result. Enlightened qualities, sounds like that's where you get, that's what emerges at the end, enlightened activity. So this is not an obvious point, and we're going to go now to the verses and explore some of the explanation behind this. But basically what it's telling us is the way we see things from our perspective, where we are now, is very different from the way it's seen once we are definitively awakened to this timeless Buddha nature. When we are definitively awakened to Buddha nature, we'll see that it's because people have Buddha nature, and there is enlightenment, and there is enlightened qualities and enlightened activity, that they can become Buddha and teach the Dharma, and on the way become the noble Sangha. That's how it is obvious to an awakened mind, but not so obvious to our minds. I hope that's okay. So here we go. And this is kind of, how can you say, a technical introduction, an overview to the last 4 chapters, big part of the text. It's a bit technical, and it's always, how can you say, much more interesting once we get into the chapters about Buddha nature. But we have to do this and get some idea. So in the book, we're on page 93, some general comments about the final 4 Vajra abodes. First point, the final 4 Vajra abodes are only truly understood by Buddhas. Verse 23, that these 3 rare and supreme, so first 3 chapters, Buddha Dhamma Sangha, arise from 1. Tainted suchness, 2. Untainted suchness, 3. The qualities of immaculate enlightenment, and 4. The deeds of the victorious ones, enlightened activity, is precisely the domain of those aware of the ultimate. Now, is precisely the domain of those aware of the ultimate. Who do we mean? Those aware of the ultimate. Well, we need a little detour into language here so that we don't get confused by this area of text. You are probably used to the term Buddha and Bodhisattva, right? Bodhisattvas, from the time you take your vow, and then when there's the first great awakening, then Bodhisattva levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 levels, and then you become Buddha. That's how you meet it in general. But when we go to the scriptures, Indian scriptures, you'll see the word Buddha, and by extension the term enlightenment, is used from the first bodhisattva level onwards. So, because it means, what does it mean? Buddha means awakened. So we're looking at degrees of awakening to this, to that, to this timeless, changeless, universal truth. So from first bodhisattva level, they are Buddhas. They're awakened beings, more and more awakened, until what we talk about in loose language as Buddhas is not just Buddhas, it is totally pure, utterly perfect, absolutely free Buddhas. Everything in the superlative, 100%, can't be more awakened. It's total awakening. But in the texts, you get these terms, samyak sams and Buddha, long words for Buddha. So we shorten that, or it has been shortened as Dharma came to the West, to Buddha for the 100%ers and Bodhisattvas for those on the way. But you should know that the term Buddha means that. And then sometimes, I found in Zen texts, you get the story of a Zen master and something happens, and then it said, and then he was enlightened. Great. Then you find in his next adventure he gets something wrong, and then he gets a lesson from his teacher, and then he gets enlightened. And you think, boy, just a moment, I thought he was already enlightened, so how could he blow it, make a mistake, and then go deeper? It's because he got Buddha and then deeper Buddha, all on the way to, in the end, becoming 100% totally pure, absolutely perfect, and so on. Buddha. So we need to know that. When we come back to this verse, it says, is precisely the domain of those aware of the ultimate. So we first become unrevertingly aware of the ultimate on the first bodhisattva level. So this awareness is there from the first bodhisattva level onwards. It gets better and better, purer and purer, faster and faster, until we're Buddha. So from that first bodhisattva level onwards, up to Buddhahood, then this process whereby Buddha nature, enlightenment, enlightened qualities, enlightened activity, give rise to beings becoming Buddha Dharma Sangha, is very obvious. So that's what that verse is saying. Now, the way it talks about our tainted suchness, untainted suchness, and then the qualities and the deeds, that's straightforward. But the first two, tainted suchness and untainted suchness. It's the first time we come across these terms, and we've got this word suchness. Now, what's the term in Sanskrit? It is dhammata. Dharma, ta. Not in this course, but in the previous course we were looking a lot at shunya ta, shunyata, shunya ta. And we saw that the ta is very much like our English word ness, where you have stickiness, for instance, or redness, or sweetness, sourness. Ta on the end of a word. So dharma means things. So it's one of those, what can you say, weird things, where you've got sacred language that is very ordinary language. With the three refuges talking about it today, I said, as the scriptures say, I called it that or it, because we have no precise terms. We have to call Buddha mind or whatever you want to call it, we have to call it that or it. So now we've got another term for it, which is suchness, dharmata. But if we use Sanskrit and use dharmata, people go off in abstract thought, and they've got dharmakayas, dharmadatus, and dharmatas, all these unknown things. And when you look at the language itself, it means thinginess, which sounds very down to earth. So whatever things there are, whatever phenomena manifest to the mind, whatever is, anything, everything, anyone, someone, whatever dharma, and there are 84,000 main ones, whichever dharma it is, this is the, whatever thing it is, this is the thinginess. Thinginess. They're all different things. Fire, water, the elements, and then devas, humans, spirits, things, dharma, are all very different, denoted by different relative qualities, but there's a ness to all of them. They've all got the same thinginess, even though they're different things. One example, it's a bit out of context, but it might help a bit. It's like honey. If you know honey, then honeys taste very different one from another, depending which flowers are there. But they've all got the taste of honey, which was a very nice piece of music, and a strange piece of music for a cowboy film, but never mind. Anyway, taste of honey. So acacia honey and all the different ones, lavender honey, they really have different taste, but the same taste. All things have the same taste of mind. But then not just mind, but the same taste of the quintessential nature of mind, voidness, clarity, and so on. Whatever that is, every single thing, every single manifestation has that thinginess. Does that make sense? You can nod or shake the head if it does or doesn't. Yes, okay. So that is technically called dharmata. But dharmata isn't a something. It's not like Lapland or a very special state where, hey man, I'm in the dharmata, kind of a state, some kind of otherness or special sacred area of meditation. It is the true nature of absolutely everything that happens each second, whether it's through our senses, in our mind, in our feelings, in our meditation experience. Every single moment has that thinginess, has that flavor once we get to know it. So that's called suchness. suchness. That's a translator's term. It was our choice when we made this book. We didn't want to put a Sanskrit word dharmata in, because people tend to make those into separate realities in their abstract thinking. So, suchness. So there is tainted suchness and untainted suchness. Tainted suchness is our Buddha nature. Just now we are ultimately Buddhas. The true nature of us all the time is Buddha, but it is covered up by our ignorance and our busy samsaric mind, the stream of consciousness. So that's the taint. And this word taint is also, of course, a translator's choice, because it doesn't mean non-virtue. It doesn't mean just anger, pride, jealousy, mind poisons. The word taint applies to anything that's dualistic. Anything. So goodness as well. Our good samsara and our bad samsara, the good things we do dualistically that produce dualistic karma, that produce a dualistic experience for us in the future, the good things, and the harmful things we do that cause harmful karma and a harmful experience, dualistic experience for us in the future, all of them cover this true nature. So when we hear the word taint, because that's the word that we chose as translators, or however it's translated, the original, it looks like stain, taint. What clouds something. It's like what would put a picture out of focus, something like that, spoils. So we've got tainted suchness. That's what we're studying when we study what we call Buddha nature. When all of the taint, all of the dualistic activity has been dealt with and liberated through meditation and skillful practice, then we become Buddha, and there is only what's left is suchness itself, untainted suchness. And once that's there, automatically we have all the enlightened qualities. That will be chapter 6, and then enlightened activity, chapter 7. So that's explained that verse a little bit. I hope it makes more sense now, so that we can read it together. And it says that these three, rare and supreme, the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, arise from tainted suchness, Buddha nature, untainted suchness, enlightenment, the qualities of enlightenment and the deeds of the victors, is the domain of those first level bodhisattvas onwards, up to and including Buddhas, aware of the ultimate. The next verse, which in this version is verse 24, and it's on page 94 of the text, says these last 4 chapters are inconceivable. So the verse says, the potential for the rare and sublime is the domain of wisdom of the omniscient. And in respective order, there are 4 reasons why these 4 aspects are inconceivable. So we're kind of halfway here. Inconceivable doesn't mean we can't think about them, otherwise there'd be no point having all the rest of this book. It would say, thought can't get it, don't bother, it's a failed mission from the start. What it means when it says inconceivable is that thought can't really get it. But while we're still thinking, there are things we can know about it. There are things this text would tell us about it. We've still got another, 400 verses to go. So for inconceivable, or for being beyond concepts, we're going to get a lot of concepts. Each verse can be unpacked with a lot of thinking, a lot of explanation, teachings. So that will help us take our thinking up to the ceiling of thinking, and it will be very useful, and it will be especially useful in dispelling mistakes we might get through our own meditation experience, because we can refer to this text and correct our practice as it goes along. It's a very important role of this text. So when it says inconceivable, it means you can get a lot of it, but you'll never really get it with your intellect. You'll really get it through meditation practice as that matures. And that's like going in a plane up through the clouds, and then in the end you pop out the other side in the land of constant sunshine. So it says there are 4 reasons. So this verse 24 is introducing verse 25, which tells us the 4 reasons why these last 4 chapters and their content, these 4 topics, Buddha nature, enlightenment, qualities, activity, are in truth beyond concept. So 4 reasons. 1, it is pure, yet accompanied by defilements. What is Buddha nature? Chapter 4. Buddha nature is pure, yet accompanied by defilements. And then, and completely undefiled, yet to be purified. No, it's a contradiction. It's a conundrum. It's, what's the word? An enigma. All those nice words. It's completely undefiled. Absolutely pure. Yet you've got to purify it. Just a moment. What did you say in the first place? It's pure. So what's all this about purifying? So there we're talking about enlightenment. The mind is completely undefiled, yet if you don't purify it, you're not enlightened. The next one, it, meaning enlightened qualities. So it has truly inseparable qualities. Although we'll look at 64 qualities, they are all qualities of the one it, of that, of enlightenment. And then last chapter, enlightened activity. It is total non-thought or absence of thought and spontaneity. So we go through them one by one. It's quite clearly explained in the book. So first one, Buddha nature is spoken of as being pure, yet accompanied by defilements. So how can, for instance, the perfection of suchness, so that's pure, the perfection of our suchness, be simultaneously present in the most violent anger or jealousy? At one and the same time, can your mind be pure, you are Buddha, and your mind is angry? So is Buddha angry? Are you both Buddha and angry? Are you Buddha and jealous? And so on and so on. So we're saying this is about Buddha nature. We say everyone has Buddha nature. Everyone is primordially pure and perfect, always has been. Yeah, including that guy over there who's beating somebody up, selling drugs, and just done this and just done this. They are a nasty piece of work. Or some people, the very embodiment of evil, and at the same time the very embodiment of Buddha. This is not easy to get our head around. So the resolution for this enigma and the way we can work with it conceptually on our level, and what will become clear when we get to first bodhisattva level, is that if the two things, purity and impurity, were of the similar nature, there will be a problem. But because they're of totally different natures, there isn't a problem. So if we go back to a topic we've touched on a few times, we can see here in this introduction to the rest of this text that it's an important thing for us to understand, which means we must give it time. We must sit with this idea until we make some sense of it for ourselves. And not in the abstract thought about sentient beings are pure but at the same time they're impure. It's about you. It's about me. How can I be, when we look at our mind, confused? How can I be upset by this? How can I be longing for that? And impure, basically, have mind poisons. And yet, at the same time, there they are telling us, but you are really and truly Buddha. And it's because the Buddha nature has a totally different nature than the nature of these, what are called passing, fleeting, transient, superficial, accidental, adventitious, depending on which translator you turn to, all those terms. The adventitious is the one that seems to have caught on, but that's a long word. We used to use passing. So totally different natures. Buddha nature is forever. It doesn't change. It's beyond time and space. It really is changeless, incorruptible. And what hides that from us is all the time changing and subject to interdependence. So in other places and later on in the Buddha Nature chapter, we're going to get examples which show how this works. One of them, very general one, is like clouds and the sun. The sun is always shining. It's there, this nuclear reactor up in the sky. It's shining heat and light all the time. But here on earth, the earth turns and clouds come and go. So we get night and day. We get grey days and clear days. But the sun is just constantly sunning. But the clouds, which don't even stay the same for a second, its passing causes and conditions make clouds, and they make the earth turn on its axis. So there's a very different nature. What is the taint, we call the taint, is impermanent and generated by interdependence. They are covering a nature which is not generated by anything. It's unborn, and it will never change. So that becomes clear when you're a first level bodhisattva. Experientially clear. It just is every moment. It's like that. How could it be anything else? So that's the first seeming paradox. Then the second one is about enlightenment itself. And enlightenment is said to be, and what is enlightenment? We saw when we looked at the Buddha chapter, it is a freedom from the kleshas, freedom from dualistic thinking, freedom from obstacles to meditation. So enlightenment is said to be completely free from defilements, but is spoken of as something to be purified step by step by gradual practice. So there again, it is the understanding of the true natures that by removing the clouds or going beyond the clouds, and there's constant sunshine. I think if you've ever gone up in a plane and you've gone through the clouds, it's just amazing. When you're up above the clouds, you're in the land of constant sunshine. And down below, there's all the different weathers. You fly halfway around the planet and you go over so many different weathers happening on the ground, but you're up in the land of constant sunshine. So it's a fact that we're all Buddha all the time, but until we remove this transient conditioning we call our karma, our stream of consciousness, that forever nature will not be manifest. We won't be enlightened. I can't tell you the importance of understanding these four paradoxes, because when you look around at our fellow Buddhists and people, especially people who get most of their Dharma online, going here and there and getting stuff from different sources that doesn't fit into a coherent pattern, then some are going around all the time saying, I'm Buddha, you're Buddha, we're all Buddha, everything's enlightened, everything's perfect. Which is an interesting state of mind to be in when we observe our friends who go around saying everything's perfect. And then you turn on the news and you see horrors, absolute horrors. I mean, things that humans do to each other which are unbelievably cruel, and where victims are hurt so much, with hurt that will last their whole lifetimes, with hurt that takes away their life in the end. And somebody telling you it's all perfect. They're all Buddhas. It's not just in the text that there's a contradiction. It's not just as an intellectual philosophical exercise. It really is a question that any caring person must ask themselves when they come across these teachings about our inner potential and enlightenment. Here we're looking at enlightenment, how what we call enlightenment's in us all the time, but until we remove something of a very different nature, which is our own story that's covering it, then the enlightened qualities can't manifest. We can't do what Buddha did. We can't do what Karmapa does, what Taisittupa does. We have to work on it, as it says, step by step, removing the obscurations, the veils. So that's something to think about on this level and get clear as much as we can. And then the next thing is enlightened qualities, and we'll get a list of those 64 key qualities, and to know that they're not separate. From our point of view, as we analyze them, they are quite separate things, this quality, that quality, but they all are there naturally present in Buddha. So when we look at enlightened qualities, then They're innate, but they only appear through our work on the path. Now, as we've seen before, we're aiming for what's called a result by removal. We're taking away the obscurations, but it could seem that your enlightened qualities are something you build up, and that will be a mistake. For instance, today you are as generous as you are today. If you go out today and meet your life, you'll be able to give of your stuff, you'll be able to give of yourself as much as you can. As we evolve along this bodhisattva path, you will be more and more generous. It looks like you are cultivating generosity. And then when you become a great bodhisattva, you'll even be able to give your life for others happily, peacefully. And you can give anything and everything, more and more, until you're Buddha. So it looks like we are cultivating, generating more and more generosity. But as we've seen, actually we are removing layer by layer greed, fear, attachment. We are taking away what is blocking, so that what is natural, if you have and somebody needs, you give, you share. It should be the most natural thing. So when we look at the qualities, they are all there in us, but they're only released, or they're only allowed to be, by our work on the path, which uncovers them step by step. We'll come back to that when we come to the chapter. It gives us a lot to think about. And then lastly, enlightened activity. Here we don't have a paradox so much as something that's hard to get, hard to imagine. So it's 2 points that we'll come to at length in the chapter. Enlightened activity, Buddha activity, activity to help. And to help is mainly through teaching. That's what Buddha is, the teacher. So all that activity of teaching from a great mind, from a perfect mind, happens without thought and spontaneously. For us, on our level, we can accomplish good actions, but our good actions require thought and they require effort. So, and then very often we get things wrong because, oh, I never thought of that. Or something seemed like a good idea and you went to go and help somebody and you made a mess of it. You should have thought more, should have got more information, should have thought about the consequences of what I was doing and so on. We don't think enough. And the better we think it through, the better we do it in normal worldly things. We can't just go and do it. We have to learn. And the learning involves a lot of thinking, taking on information, guidance, instruction. We're talking about teaching. And so it involves thought, and usually thought's a good thing. So on the path we have right thought, right intention. They're things we need in the dualistic world to cultivate. So here we're seeing that whatever Buddhas do to help, whatever this enlightened suchness does to help, happens without thought. We can't think of a world without thought. You can't think it. And then what happens if you try not to think, to try and experience a world without thought? What is going to experience it? Or are you going to be trying to create an imaginary non-thought space? What are you thinking just now about non-thought? And if you are in the state of non-thought, come back. What happened? What was it? Or if you're in a state of non-thought, can you act skillfully? So for us, it's not something easy to understand. And then this, with no effort, all through the Bodhisattva path, we're learning about fourth paramita, diligence, right effort, and applying effort. Effort, one of the topics, as insatiability. We learn to transform our worldly insatiability, where we can never get enough of samsara, into Dharma insatiability, where you can never get enough of it. More, bring it on. Bring on the experience, bring on the learning, all of it. Effort. And then the better thought out the effort, the more likely our activity is to succeed. So where we're moving towards, step by step with the path, is totally spontaneous but perfect activity to benefit others. Now, how that works, is only clear to enlightened minds from the first bodhisattva level onwards. To put it in very ordinary terms, you don't do anything simply by being, things happen. By being in the right place, all the right things happen. If we put it in very ordinary language, the doing stops being doing, dualistic doing. Well, that's a hard one. Dualistic doing. Stops, and by being the suchness, things just sort themselves out. Our presence becomes this, what Vajradhara holds, wish-fulfilling gem, what Chenrezig holds, wish-fulfilling gem. Just by being. And in that pure being, where there's no thought, no duality, then so much activity is accomplished. So that's hard for us to manage. This fourth point is not a conflict, a paradox. It's simply Buddha activity, enlightened activity, is not like worldly activity that needs thought and effort. So now we move on to the last verse in this introduction, which present these last 4 chapters as cause and condition. So verse 26, since there is that to be realized, the realization, so that to be realized, Buddha nature, the realization, enlightenment, the attributes of realization, Buddha qualities, and that which brings realization, the activity, then respectively the first point is the prime cause, that to be purified, and the remaining 3 points constitute conditions. So now we're in a weird place. We're in a weird place, how can you say, philosophically, we're in a weird place here. We're talking about the absolute, we're saying it's beyond concept, really. What we're really talking about is beyond concept, but let's concept about it a bit. So we're in a dualistic world of conceiving and conceptualizing. We're saying on this level, where we're conceptualizing the non-conceptual, where we're having some idea in our relative reality of something that's totally different, then in that place, it is like prime cause, secondary conditions. Prime cause, secondary conditions. Prime cause is like a seed. A seed has all the programming, all the DNA of the result. Each seed, so unique. Each flower, each plant, however that seed is, it is the only thing in the entire universe that can make the result. Nothing, no one can make a dandelion, but a dandelion seed. With all the things that a dandelion is, its leaves, its little, what they call them, the wonderful things that fly off in the wind and everything, all of that's programmed, the genetics in a dandelion seed and nowhere else. No other way anywhere of making a dandelion but from that seed. So what we call a prime cause has all the genetics of the result within it. What we call secondary condition is what's necessary for that prime cause to produce its result. So each seed has the programming of its result, but all the seeds need soil, water, warmth, fertilizer. So the secondary conditions are more general. And of course, depending what type of a seed, some need more water, less water, more light, less light, this kind of fertilizer, not that kind of fertilizer. But nevertheless, the secondary conditions alone can never produce the result. You can put as much soil, warm it with sunlight, water it, put fertilizer on it, but if there ain't no dandelion seed in there, you're never going to get a dandelion. So secondary conditions are very different from prime cause. You must get this idea of a prime cause has all the genetics of the result. So when we look at these last 4 chapters, what we call Buddha nature or Gotra is the prime cause for enlightenment, enlightened qualities, enlightened activities, for actually the prime cause for the first 3 chapters, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. But then how we nurture that seed, that prime cause, is through enlightenment, is through enlightened qualities, and is through enlightened activity. That's the introduction. It's telling us this is not easy to understand, and in fact you won't really get it till you're on first level bodhisattva. But the fact that we have Buddha nature, and that enlightened beings with their enlightened qualities and activity can help us know what to do with it. That we can become Buddhas and teach the Dharma, and on the way become noble Sangha. So that's the main point today, is this overview of the remaining 4 chapters and the main bulk of this text. So now if we go into the first of these, biggest chapter in this text, it's about our Buddha nature. And we're going to look at it in 3 areas. So in terms of learning this text or appreciating it, the structure, if you remember, with Buddha we looked at benefit for oneself, benefit for others. With Dharma we looked at truth of the path, truth of cessation. With Sangha we looked at as it is wisdom, and as many as there are wisdom, where we know Buddha nature in ourselves and in all other beings. So these are the big structural things of the text. Now, when we come to Buddha nature, we will look at it in three ways. Three ways. The first one, we'll look at what are called the three great reasons. They're called reasons, they're not really reasons, but it's what they're called. The three great reasonings. Reasons. That's, how can you say, the briefest way of understanding Buddha nature. When we study Gampopa's Ornament of Precious Liberation, then that's the way he presents Buddha nature. Three reasons. Then we'll look at 10 extensive chapters about 10 aspects of this Buddha nature within us. So 3 reasons, 10 chapters, and then there'll be 9 examples. And those examples, they are incredible examples to help us understand Buddha nature. And it's a delightful part of this text to study, because we do the 9 examples, which have their own meaning, but then we look at them and see how they apply to the path, and we see a whole other dimension to these 9 examples. So 3 reasons, 10 topics, 9 examples. That's the way we're going to look at this Buddha nature. When we first studied this with Khenpo Sultim, he spent quite a bit of time at this point talking about the Sanskrit term Gotra, which is Rik in Tibetan. It's a different spelling from the Rik of Rigpa, which means wisdom, and which is a term used a lot in the Nyingmapa tradition. It's not that Rik. It sounds a bit different and it's spelled different. The Tibetan, for those of you who know Tibetan, has a second suffix. It has a sa at the end, so it's riks rather than rik. And it sounds like a K, but it's spelled with a G. So if you see transliteration, you see rigpa, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like rikpa, like a K. But people say rigpa. I say people pronounce things, well, differently. So this is rik, no pa on the end. Rik, and it's kind of a longer. It's not rik, as in rikpa, which is intelligence. This is rik. This is rik, it's long. And so the meaning I've already explained today, but now we'll think about it a bit more. Because it's what this whole chapter is about. And we don't have one English word that is going to help us except Buddha nature, which doesn't correspond to anything in the original texts. There's no word nature, there's no word Buddha, but somehow it works and everyone uses it, so great. But we need to know, because we're studying accurately, what Rik in Tibetan or Gotra means. So the first meaning is potential. Potential. What does potential mean? It's not there yet, but it could happen. Potential. So, otherwise we don't use the word potential. If they say, oh, Ken, yes, there's great potential, which means maybe sometime in the future, if we do all the right things, something can happen. You don't talk about potential if the result's already there. So when we look at potential, when we say this word Gotra or Rik or Buddha nature, one of the meanings is we all have the potential to become Buddhas. We are future Buddhas. The potential, the possibility is there. So then, for instance, what have I got here? Walnut. This walnut will never become Buddha. Sorry, whoops, it's run away. It's disappointed. It does not have Buddha nature. It doesn't have past karma. It hasn't taken the bodhisattva vow. It's not even taken refuge. Doesn't even know about suffering. Never going to become walnut Buddha. But you, unlike the walnut, you have everything you need already inside you. You have a complete kit. You know, it's like when you buy a computer, a laptop. Not so much these days because everybody knows about them and people were used to them by now. But going back 20 years or so, it comes with all stuff in it, so much stuff preloaded. And you don't even know everything that's in it. And then bit by bit, you learn this program, that program, how to Photoshop, how to do your accounts, how to word process. And even then you're discovering new things you can do. It was all in there from the beginning. But at first it was all preloaded, but we had to learn how to use it. So in this word Gotra, when we think of ourselves and other sentient beings, it's all in there already. It's in ourselves, everything we'll ever need. We just need to discover it. And that's a wonderful word. Discover. It's covered. We need to take the lid off, take the covering off, remove the veils. It's like when you access in your preloaded computer, how do you get into that program? What's the password? And then once it's up and running, how do you get into it productively so that you can use it better and better? So potential is one idea. Everything's there. And so therefore there is a potential. Another word is this word, which is family, clan, or it's like having the blood, the DNA of a certain family. So it's like you've got Buddha blood in your veins. And when they're looking for the next king, it's like if you had the royal blood and they could test your blood. Complete detour, a deviation. But I had a friend, dead quite a while ago, who was a descendant of one of the European royal families, but somewhere along the line, another part of the family had taken over, so they're the actual royalty these days. And he and his family spent most of their life trying to prove that they ought to be king of this particular country, and fighting with the Vatican because the proof was in the Vatican, but the Vatican wouldn't release it. Yeah. So my friend had the royal blood and when he was doing this, there wasn't DNA like we have it today. This is 30 years ago. And so they only had documentary proof. These days, he could do a DNA test, and that would be different. But this idea, it's similar, but it's a bit different. It's like who you really are. And it's like these fairy stories of someone who is destined to be a great person, but who doesn't know it yet, and who's living in poverty or simplicity. And, it hasn't come out yet, but it's in them. It's in them. So it's the idea of potential, but with a slightly different perspective of this is who you are. And then this becomes beautiful in Vajrayana with real empowerment in the original sense, which is a replica of an enthronement ceremony where you are actually put on a throne. So of course this doesn't happen in enthronement, in empowerment ceremonies these days. Somebody's sitting on a throne, the Lama, you go up, you get all the ceremonial contacts and you say things. But in the real empowerment, then you are enthroned as who you really are. The whole point of Vajrayana practice is that now we relate to ourselves as good, as pure, as Buddha, more and more. So anyway, there's this idea in Gotra of lineage, clan, the family you belong to. You belong to the family of enlightened beings. Then there's this idea of seed. Again, it's the idea of potential, but now with the seed, because people know about seeds, you come from agricultural societies, you know that a seed is a seed, but it's only when you plant it properly, look after it properly, that it will give the result. So this idea of a seed or potential is a very kind of practical one. What needs to be done here to make me Buddha? What methods, what understanding, what needs to be input to me? So they're the three main ideas. I think you can stretch it to 4 or 5. But it's just to introduce this term Gotra or Rik that this whole chapter is about, and that we call Buddha nature. So then we're going to look at it through 3 reasons, 10 key chapters and 9 examples. And today we'll start on the 3 key reasons and let them sit for a week and come back to it a bit next week. So these are called reasons. Now, at the beginning of our studies, I reminded you that there are 2 ways we can approach this topic, philosophically or from the meditator's way. And we're primarily using the meditator's way of understanding a Sangha's text. If we have the philosopher's way, and we are studying in a monastic college, and we are learning debate, and how through debate to establish shunyata, and how shunyata has the same meaning as Dharmakaya, and how Dharmakaya is the very essence of what is Buddha, then there is a logical debate procedure whereby we can argue that because everything is shunyata and therefore everything has the nature of Dharmakaya, that everyone has Buddha nature. There is a way logically of defending it. If you've studied for years, all the various levels and Chittamatra and Madhyamaka, and then the logic and the debate associated with each, then you can argue this. So they become 3 reasonings. For us as meditators, let's rather see them as 3 key statements to reflect on again and again. First one, all beings have Buddha nature. Second one, that Buddha nature is exactly the same in all of them with no differentiation. Third, therefore there is potential. Please learn these three, preferably by next week. All beings have Buddha nature. That's one. Buddha nature is exactly the same in every sentient being, each and every sentient being. There is no platinum quality Buddha nature in some, and gold quality Buddha nature in others, and copper, whatever, different. It's Buddha nature is the same in the very worst and the very best of sentient beings. There's no differentiation. Every being has Buddha nature. Buddha nature is the same in each being. Therefore, there is potential. These are our three statements to contemplate so that they become real. When you look at a fly flying around, when you see cats ripping up birds, when you observe human beings, wonderful human beings, harmful human beings, it is this every sentient being, even somewhere inside your furniture, tiny little woodworm, just a mouth eating its way through cellulose, has Buddha nature. So every sentient being has it. And of course that leads on to think, well, what is a sentient being then? Where does sentient being stop and life, but non-sentient life, start? Chemically, where do cells, like you find in plants and so on, and more cells and different cells that we call life, where does that stop being just life and become a sentient being accumulating karma with rebirth and the possibility for enlightenment? So what is a sentient being? And once there is a sentient being, then that sentient being has Buddha nature, by the very fact of being a sentient being, having a mind. The second point, that is undifferentiated. Now this is technically interesting and historically very important. There is no difference of Buddha nature between any sentient being, especially a difference of sex. There is no male Buddha nature, female Buddha nature. It is not more or less present in any type of sex. And then race. And when we go back to India, caste. It is not as though some castes have Buddha nature and some don't, or some have a better Buddha nature and some have a worse Buddha nature. This was a huge social impact of Buddhism in India at the time of Buddha, and then in more recent times, in the 20th century, a huge impact when Dr. Ambedkar and others in India kind of revived, because Buddhism disappeared from India. It only came back really last century to India. And so people like Dr. Ambedkar told the untouchables, so-called untouchables, low caste people, you also have exactly the same Buddha nature as the Brahmins and as the Sikhs and the soldiers and so on. So There is no difference of Buddha nature due to any of our human differences and animal differences. Same. So Buddha nature has no compartments. The wording looks like it is non-compartmentalized. It is the same in everybody. All beings have it, and they have it the same. It means that your Buddha nature is the same as Karmapas, is the same as the Dalai Lamas, is the same as Shakyamunis. You don't have a tiny, tiny, pathetic little Buddha nature, whereas they had a super Buddha nature to start with. Exactly the same. Exactly the same. And it will never change. So the first 2 points are wonderful news of our 3. Everybody's got Buddha nature. And people would tell you that. You are Buddha. Lamas would tell you that. You are Buddha. And not only that, but your potential is the same as, even though you might not feel very, how can you say, what they say, much self-esteem. But it's the same as all of the great spiritual beings. All of it's the same inside you. That's good news. Number 3 has to be a but. Well, it doesn't have to be, but it is. And so the third point is, therefore there is potential. And that's where we have this word, rik, comes to its own. Because although we've all got the Buddha nature the same, unfortunately, due to our own past karma, some of us have covered it up more than others. Some of us have covered it up really an awful lot. Covered so much that you'd never know it's there. And others, they've spent past lives uncovering it and uncovering it up, so that when it comes into this life, it can shine very quickly, given the help from the outside, the Dharma practice, meeting the right teachers. Woo! They just blossom so quickly. So when we look at, on a relative level, this second nature, the passing clouds of our karma, of our stream of consciousness, then we find 5 levels of potential. All the same inside, but depending on how much it's covered up or uncovered. So the first one is called cut-off potential, where for the time being, there's not much that can be done to help somebody like that. No matter how hard you try, their potential is so covered up by heavy karma and by mind poisons that the anger, the pride, the desire, the greed, and so on, would stop any dharma penetrating to help that person. So for the time being, not forever, but for the time being, they are cut off from help. The second type is called uncertain. So the first type is called the cut-off group or family. The second type is called the uncertain family. They are what we'd call seekers these days. And it's uncertain because they're in a very kind of wobbly state. It says they really feel there is something, spirituality we call it, something there to be found, some deeper truth behind existence, some meaning to your life, a path, a way to be found. They really, something inside longs for it. They are seeking. And so then, depending on karma and circumstances, it says when they find something that seems to respond, then they'll go for it. They'll grab it. So depending on how fortunate or unfortunate they are, it says they will be attracted by and connect with a certain faith. Then they'll take on all the jargon, the language, the rituals of that particular faith in a hope that it will awaken and open up their spirituality. So it says this is quite a dangerous, uncertain phase, because the longing is so much and there is so much, how can you say, on offer out there in the world from different faiths, different teachers, different systems. So it says there are those who are seeking and connecting up one way or another. Those cut off, those wandering and seeking. Then the last three are those who found what in Buddhist terms are valid paths that will satisfy their inner Buddha nature's seeking. And there we have the three levels of Dharma, the Shravakas, the Pratyeka Buddhas, the Bodhisattvas. So the Shravaka family, Pratyeka Buddha family, Bodhisattva family. So all of that to describe this third thing. Therefore there is potential. Wonderful, we're all Buddha. Wonderful, we're all Buddha the same, deep inside. Hands-on, practically speaking, how effectively we can become the Buddha we really are depends on what's covering up our Buddha nature, which one of those five families we're in, and then what can and can't be done according to that potential determined by the family that we're in. So we'll come back to that next week. Today we've finished, and whatever was good and meaningful today, then we dedicate, we share with everybody. May whatever virtue was created by this session contribute to the state of omniscience being attained, through the main enemy, our mind's defilements, being completely defeated. Through that, may each and every sentient being become free from the ocean of existence, troubled by its waves of rebirth, aging, sickness, and death. May this precious bodhicitta arise in those in whom it's not arisen. May its development know no setbacks. May it increase ever more and more. Through our virtue, may we quickly achieve Mahamudra and establish every single sentient being in that same accomplishment. Sorry, I clicked the wrong thing there. Afficher. So over to you, and welcome to, I see a few people I didn't get a chance to say hello to at the beginning. Susan, Susanna, Pushpa, I can't remember if we said hello, but anyway, hello to anyone. I mean, Alex, I don't think we said hello. Hello. Brendan and Roz, Miranda. So I don't know if you've got any reflections, questions, something you'd like to share.
Hi, Ken. No questions, but two reflections or comments. First of all, I thought it was most interesting that you sort of reversed, like the first three normally like being the cause and the result being the four, whereas you explained that it's actually the reverse, that the four are the cause and the first three are the result. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yes.
The second one is when you were talking about dhammata and suchness, you referred to the taste of honey. This might be a bit irrelevant, but just happened last night. I was watching a TV program by Michael Portillo, who does these great train journeys, and he was in Scotland, and he visited a research station where they study bees and honey.
Mm.
They've analysed the DNA of all the plants and flowers in this district, and then they collect samples of honey and analyze by analyzing its DNA, they can tell which plants that particular
Mm.
honey has brought from, and then they establish which are the most favored plants or flowers by the bees. So they then generate a list of the natural plants and sort of human planted plants that are most favourable to the bees, and therefore they can help the bees
Mm.
develop. I thought it was very interesting.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's not a terrific example. We do come actually back to that example at the end of this chapter about different honeys, but all having the taste of honey. Uh, uh, but that it kind of works and it kind of doesn't. It's like no examples are really very good, and it's like the real meaning is everything that we will ever be, has ever been, is an experience of mind, an experience of mind. So an experience of mind is called a dharma. And this is the dhammata. This is the mindiness of each experience. Whatever the temporary nature of that experience, it's an experience of the mind. So in each experience, there's the, if you're burning your finger, as an example, there's the burn, there's the sensations, there's what you see here, there's all the details of that dharma, burning finger. But all of that's happening in your mind. So there's the mindiness of that, and the mindiness of that same finger in a pot of marmalade. And you can have something that's pleasant, The mindiness is the same. The experience is quite different. So that will only make sense when through your shamatha and vipassana practice, you've got the mind so quiet that you can actually poke around and find, well, what is the mind when barely anything's happening? What is the mindiness that's there? Mind itself. We have words like that, dhammata, could also be translated as, chittata. Chitta means mind. Chitta means mind. Chittata means the mindiness of things. So that's a word that exists. That's what it looks like in Sanskrit, the mindiness. It looks very ordinary. But of course, you put it in a text and you start talking to people about chittata, and then they've got another sort of high-flying abstract concept. Then what's the difference between chittata and dhammata? It's the same thing. But now that we've made it an abstract concept, that's chittata, that's dhammata. You're saying the mindiness, the thinginess. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. There's mindiness in everything we experience. There's the thinginess that our mind experiences phenomena. We're having a phenomenal experience. So there's the thinginess and the mindiness. It's so down to earth. All these words. And they really do get lost in translation.
I have a question. There's something which has been bothering me, especially in the last year and a half. There are really some people, you mentioned them, like their cruelty is beyond words, totally inhuman. And when I think about those people when they come up to the news and you can't escape it much, then I'm trying to apply this idea. Oh yeah, they have also Buddha nature. They have the potential. They have their Buddha nature is the same as mine and everything. And I just can't get my head around it. It goes against every humane notion in me. Just to think about it, like giving an excuse or giving some sort of a forgiveness.
No, I think it's a very, very pertinent, it's absolutely excellent question, because if we're going to be bodhisattvas and eventually become Buddhas, we've got to sort this one out
Exactly.
very clearly. And the horrors that we witness beings doing, we have to adjust our thinking so that we have a compassionate regard. I think the key to it is to be found in stories of people who are reformed. For instance, I've known in people coming to Samiling to see Akon Rinpoche, at least 2 murderers, right? They deliberately murdered people. One was, he only murdered 1 person and was in prison for that, murdered his wife actually. And the other person was a professional hitman, so murdered quite a few people for money. Both of them, through Dharma, became good people. Really good people. I mean, it's like Milarepa's story. They had something weighing heavily on them, huge karma, and they had to first accept themselves, face themselves, work with it, and so they both, in their own way, became kind people. And one of them, a kind person who was helping lots and lots of other people. The one who was the hitman became a great benefactor of people. So when you see this ability of the heart to turn, that's what we're talking about, a potential. It doesn't mean they're Buddha now. It doesn't mean they're good now. Of course they're not. And when we look next week at the cut-off family, the first one, it says not only is what they're doing and what they've done cut them off from an awareness of this Buddha nature, but it's actually cutting them off more. It's like heaping up stuff. So when we get to the 9 examples, the first example is a piece of gold that's been buried in a rubbish heap. Now, if you traveled in, I was going to say undeveloped countries, but in some developed countries too, when the bin men are on strike. But anyway, in undeveloped countries, sometimes at the edge of the village, you've got a rubbish heap. And it's been a rubbish heap for centuries. There's like layer upon layer of rotting things, often where the cows eat and the other animals, sort through it. So the idea is gold, which is incorruptible, has been buried under layer upon layer of all sorts of rotten, yuck stuff. But no matter how many layers there are, because it's gold, it's still there. And if even centuries of stuff can be removed and taken away, that gold can then shine. So the way we look on anybody who's doing horrible things is not to excuse them and say they're Buddha, but to know that if only they can be told, discover some way that they have a treasure inside them, then there is the possibility, and it may be in hundreds of lifetimes' time. But that's the way we look on them, as somebody who can be good, who can transform, who can convert. But it doesn't mean in any way clouding our eyes to what's going on now. This person is making for themselves terrible karma, and they're hurting people, and it's the most awful and disgusting, tragic thing to witness. We have to be totally clear. I don't know if that helps, but it's about relating to them heart to heart, seeing them. One example in the scriptures is a child in fever. It's a very vivid example. You've got a child that's ill, so an only child. That's up the drama. It's your only child, and you've got a parent, and so the child, because he's delirious, is actually striking out at his mother. So I suppose if you were an AI-driven mother and thinking like a computer, you'd say, this child has become unproductive and useless. It's hitting me. Time to give it up and get another one, or have a life without children, because the rotten little bastard's hitting me and saying delirious things, and the punch is hurt, and I don't want anything more to do with this. Look at that. Can't even think straight anymore. Get rid of it. Would be a kind of a logical thought. But if it's a loving parent, because the child is so delirious, is doing such harmful things, which isn't their true nature, related to their true nature, then you love and care for that child all the more. You want to get them out of the sickness all the more, because you have this longer term vision. You're not looking at the blows that are being dealt to you now. You're looking at how can we get this child well again and healthy. So we try as bodhisattvas to see everyone as future Buddhas. We think of Milarepa's story. He killed 35 people in the story. And he really suffered a lot to shake off that karma and to become what he became. So we just pray to be able to help, and at the same time recognize good from evil in terms of relative karma.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I need to think a lot about it again and again, but
yeah,
but you've given me the string of thought.
Yeah.
It's especially difficult when you think about the harm, not even to oneself. Thank goodness I wasn't there to experience it, but the harm that they did to others, do to others still. It's like, who am I to, think about him as a potential bodhisattva and all that? And all these people, they got the worst part of it.
Yeah, they're completely cut off. So that's that's just the category that they're in. And there's lots of examples like Donald Trump or Putin and all these crazy Assad, these crazy people, Kim Jong-un. But they have the capacity, they have the potential, but they're just crazy people, completely cut off. Can't do anything about it. Better luck next lifetime. So I had a question about two questions basically that are sort of the same. One of them, you were talking about non-thought and spontaneously. So the spontaneous, effortless, I understand pretty easily, but the non-thought, you had two categories. One, which was more like not planning. Like you were saying, you got to think about what the consequences are. You got to think about the person. You got to think about, so there's all this like planning on, like we have to, if we're going to give a teaching on Buddha nature, you have to do a lot of thinking and a lot of planning to make sure you cover everything. You review the text, all that kind of stuff. So that's one kind of non-thought, is non-planning. And another kind of non-thought is like a zombie is non-thought.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're not talking about a zombie kind of non-thought as being enlightenment.
No, we're talking about the other Rigpa, which is enlightened intelligence. And that's well, it could take a couple of, I mean, the
Yeah.
examples
So
don't work.
yes.
And we get the examples when we come to the enlightened activity chapter. Then again, we've got, is it 9? We've got a lot of good examples. But to put a simple Ken example, if I suddenly throw you a ball and you catch it before you've even got time to think about it, or, sometimes I amaze myself because I'm not a very, how can you say, physically able, adept person. But sometimes I knock something off the table and catch it. How do I do that? You didn't even have time to think, and you caught it,
Right.
right? That's spontaneous action, but it's spontaneous because of so much training before, right? Or if you're out in the garden and you're so used to things and pruning, first, if you're pruning a fruit tree, you have to read the book and where do you cut it and which angle do you cut it and how high up the branch, and you need to maybe learn from somebody. But once you've been doing that for 20 years, the time of the year goes out and you're just snip, snip, snip. You don't need to think. The thing is there, the tool's in your hand, and it's just so natural. I think natural is another word about the activity. So much about Buddhahood makes sense when we look at the stages of the path and in the 10 bodhisattva levels, how there is dualistic thought in the first 7 levels, in the last 3 levels, no dualistic thought, and how the spontaneity grows and how at Buddhahood it becomes perfect, and there isn't thought. There are the 5 Buddha wisdoms which are naturally present and which make all of the activity. So when we look at the 5 Buddha wisdoms in the 10 bodhisattva levels, at which level they start to come on stream and how they become more and more present, then we see that when there's that kind of clarity and natural skill, there's no need for thought. Thoughts are clumsy.
You mean discursive thoughts? I think you mean by thoughts. The mind stream, the discursive thought, the dualistic thoughts disappear. And then they talk about non-dual wisdom.
Yeah.
Which also has thoughts, but they're non-dual. It's not tainted by duality or stained by duality. But there's still there's definitely awareness that's going on. Milarepa, the Buddha, they interacted with people. They were able to eat food.
Yeah.
So it's not like there weren't any thought or any object like a zombie.
It's not like a zombie,
clarity.
but the thought is replaced by spontaneous wisdom.
Right. I agree. I got what you're saying. Yeah, I agree with that.
I mean, and you really see this when, on our level, when you go in to see a really good teacher, right? I saw this so many times when I was interpreting. When the person's there unloading their bag, right? They're unloading Rinpoche and they've got their list of questions and they've got all the things they want. But when you're sort of tuned into the Rinpoche side, they are just sensing, feeling the situation. They know what they want to tell that person to do, no matter what the blah blah is saying. And of course, they'll hear the blah blah blah, and they'll try and phrase it as an answer to what the person's coming to them with. But they just know what they need. And
exactly.
The skillful ones can put that very kindly. I remember there was one, the English Lama, or not, I think he was Canadian actually, but anyway, Western Lama who founded what became Samiling, before it was Samiling. So he was called Venerable Ananda Bodhi. I met him a few times. He was incredibly perceptive, but in quite a challenging way. So you'd have a room full of people and somebody would ask a Dharma question. And this guy, he'd zoom in about what's really going on in the person's head and kind of strip them naked. Not literally, but, he would say something that was really pertinent about their own character, personality, and sort of the real them behind that question. And but it was a similar sort of thing, it comes through meditation where you have much clearer idea of what's going on inside the person, and you address that, no matter how they're covering it up with their own masks and personality projection and I'm a good Buddhist projection and all the rest of it. It's kind of to the core. And I think if you've seen this happen with a good Lama, a good Rinpoche, you kind of feel the spontaneity. And they're not thinking about the person. And they don't have to kind of look up the person in all the scriptures. This is from a page 99 type A subsection 3 part B type person where you need to give this answer. The answer's already welling out of them without thought as they're listening to the person and receiving them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ken, I was just thinking that following on from Milton's thing, that I just wonder whether experiences that you can have in, for example, music situations, especially improvisation, where that kind of discursive thought can just disappear if everything's flowing, and people just, a bunch of musicians who really get it together can just be spontaneously improvising, and it just works. Because there's just that kind of, you just know what to do next that fits in with it. I don't know, I've had little glimpses of that experience, but I've seen other people really playing amazing stuff in a completely improvised way, and it just was incredible to watch.
Yeah.
And also occasionally with one or two doctors that I've met who just seemed to see straight away what was really the problem before you'd really said anything. It's quite interesting.
Yeah, I met all of those. And they're very helpful, inspiring circumstances. Engineers too. I got a friend, an engineer in Africa, and he travels over the world solving problems in factories. And he said once he had a conversation with his boss, because like he goes and he's got the expertise, but he said to me, he said, you know what really happens? Almost as soon as I walk in the door, I've got it. And then people come and tell me, all the people working in the factory, and there's this, and this went wrong, and all of that. And he said, you have to listen to it. But then nearly all the time, what they say confirms it, and you know just where to go, just what to fix. So he said, once I kind of confessed that to my boss, who's the head of the whole company he works for, who's also an engineer. And the boss said, well, me too. The same thing. And there's this kind of feel. I remember my chemistry teacher at school in the summer, he kept the window open. He was an enthusiast car motor repairer. He was a chemist, but as a teacher, but he was mad about cars. And he'd stop in the middle as a car went by, and he'd tell us how the tappets needed adjusting or something else. He was just there. Yeah. Music's amazing when you improvise like that. And then you just don't dare look down because it's kind of happening, and the thinking kills it. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Thank you, Ken.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Ken, could I ask a question, please?
Yes, of course.
It was going to slightly what Yale and I think it was, I've just lost him on the screen now. The question about compassion and how we deal with those who do great harm. I might have completely misunderstood some other teachings. But I work in the criminal justice system, so I deal with a lot of, let's loosely say, bad people. And I find that treating them as teachers, seeing that whatever bad they have done, that spawns a reaction in me, which, as long as I'm aware of, I can then learn from. Treating them as teachers, so not condoning what they do, not agreeing with what they do, but taking from their bad what good I can get to advance my practice, helps me keep my heart much more open to them and stops me going, you're bad over there, you're different from me, you're not the same as me. By saying you are somebody else who is on the same path as me, you're doing bad things, you're doing horrendous things, but I can still learn from that. I find that helps me keep my heart much more open and keeps that compassion going. Sometimes it's a stretch, not going to lie. Frequently, it's an absolute stretch. Is that a valid way of looking at it, or am I herring off down completely the wrong pathway?
No,
Thank you.
that's part of. I think it's. Thank you for sharing that first of all, and then I think it's valid. I think it's very good that you've found a way that helps you, and that indirectly, I'm sure, will help them better because you're not judging, or you are. I suppose that allows you to allow them more space to evolve, and I think it's part of what a bodhisattva is trying to do because of these Buddha nature teachings. And it kind of fits in with lots of things. When we're doing some practices, like in the foundations, when we do Guru Yoga practice, then everyone becomes our guru, and everything is a learning situation. And so it kind of would fit in there. If you were at that stage of a practice, then that would be not just something that you could do to help, but it would be a state of mind you'd be nurturing all the time, moment after moment in the day. Everything that happens is something to learn from. Everyone's your teacher. Everything's your teacher. And you're like in the presence of Buddha all the time. And you get stories of yogis in the past. They end up making prostrations to dogs and cats because they think, this is my teacher, this is my guru's everywhere.
Thank you. I think I've got a few 100,000 prostrations to go first, sadly.
Yeah, well, they all help.
Thank you, Ken.
Yeah.
Ken, it's just a very quick one following on from that, and just wanted to say thanks to Yale and Helen for their questions and input just now. I think that's been really useful, very resonant for me at the moment. It was just an incident years back when I was riding my bike into work, and it was a rainy morning, and a guy didn't stop at a junction, rode me straight onto the bonnet of his car, and luckily stopped. But it was quite a near miss incident. But while I was on the bonnet of the car, I was violently angry. I was trying to punch him through the windscreen and stuff like that, which doesn't work. And then I landed on the road and got out of the way and the rest of it. And once I jumped up and I was safe, he was coming across the road to me. And at that point, I was ready to attack him. I was really violently angry. So I thought he'd done it deliberately. And then when I saw the shock on his face, instantly it just vanished. And I just wasn't angry anymore. It was, it's quite a powerful experience remembering it, actually. And it was that because I was able to see that he wasn't trying to harm me, that there was that he was genuinely shocked, that something there just made a difference, and it defused the really violent anger I had straight away. So I don't know if that's any sort of help. It meant that we were able to have a constructive. We sorted it out, and it was okay in the end. But yeah, it was a powerful moment, but trying to be in the right state to be able to do that earlier that's an ongoing challenge for me. I don't know if that's useful to anybody, but it's just those earlier questions very much resonate for me. It's a big issue at the moment, especially, and I suppose practically what I'm trying to do while I struggle with this is sometimes actually just put a limit on the news that I watch and just deliberately treat it like an allergen and maybe avoid it sometimes just so I can cope with it and get some sleep, So,
Good idea.
Anyway,
Good idea.
I hope that's of some use.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, it's a vivid memory from me because on my first driving test, my foot slipped off the brake at a T-junction and I pulled out in front of a motorcyclist. And I remember the horror of the thump on my side and then seeing the person fly through the air and then not knowing fortunately he wasn't injured too much. And of course I didn't pass my driving test and I got a careless driving conviction for that. So it kind of resonated with me because I was horrified when I got out of the car. But what I think is more generally with these things where it's hard to think of a person as a future Buddha and so on. One thing that's incredibly useful is you give yourself a month's trial. You say, like, for the next week, for the next month, I'm going to do my utmost best to try and see this person through loving, caring, respectful eyes. Like just now, the person I'm looking at, one day he's going to become a Buddha. Like when Shakyamuni Buddha told the story of how before his bodhisattva vow, he killed his mother in a very early life, killed his own mother. So just like he became Buddha, this person will become Buddha one day. And so you just give yourself a trial. You try that for 1 week, a month, and systematically, whenever there's these terrible news and this person's done this again or whatever, or these soldiers are doing this, whatever, then you just give yourself that trial. And of course, you can't help but hear other people who aren't on your trial program, and they are, criticizing, hating, upset. You see what their projection onto the person does to them. The place it's taking them, and especially people who watch non-stop news these days. I don't know how they can, but the kind of mind frame, everyone's talking about, Trump, what's his name, Musk, and so on, as though they're the only people, the only thing that's happening in the whole damn world. It's stupid. There's so much going on in the world all the time. So anyway, if you take a trial and you just have this 100% kind, long-term Buddha nature disposition, just experiment with it. And then at the end of the month, you can go back or not, depending. Okay, it's a long session today, so I better let you all go and take care. Lots of love to everybody and see you next week. Bye now.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Try.
Thank you, Ken. Bye all.